hit like and subscribe. You're watching the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel.
Peace, family. This is your brother, Marc Lamont Hill. Welcome to a special edition of Night School. Every night here on the Marc Lamont Hill official YouTube channel, we hold an episode of Night School where we break down the most controversial subjects, the most engaged debates, the most interesting topics going on in the world today. But Friday is usually a day where we don't do an episode, but today is different. Today we are going to reflect and think about the life and the death of Assata Shakur. For those that don't know, Assata Shakur passed away yesterday, Thursday, in Cuba at the age of 78. Assata Shakur was an activist, an organizer, a mother, a writer, a revolutionary, show enough revolutionary. She was born in New York City. She was raised in New York as well as North Carolina, Wilmington. She came of consciousness at a fairly young age. She eventually joined the Black Panther Party. She also was a member of the Black Liberation Army. She spent most of her life, fighting against white supremacy, fighting against social injustice, fighting for Black liberation, and waging war against white supremacy, waging war against injustice, not just at the national level, but at the international level. Assata's story is such a powerful one, and I encourage, and I'm going to say this a few times tonight, I encourage everyone to read the book Assata, and I'll pull it up for y'all. I want you to read Assata. Assata is one of those books, man. It's one of them ones. I don't think your life will be complete if you don't read it. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm not being dramatic. I'm not saying this today for the first time. I say it all the time because it's true. And so tonight I want to talk a little bit about Assata. I want to talk about what she meant. I want to talk about why it's important to think about her legacy. I want to talk about what that legacy absolutely was. Again, she was born in New York. She was born in Queens. Grew up in the city. Grew up in New York. Spent time in a few places, but like a lot of people of Assata's age, remember Assata's born in 1947. In the 60s, she became, and I mean this in the best sense of the term, radicalized. She became involved in campus activism. She went to BMCC. I'm part of the CUNY system, Borough of Manhattan Community College. She also was at City College, and she got engaged in activism. She met folk there. She moved with people. She began to understand the political lines of the day. She began to understand the Black nationalist agenda. She began to have critiques of capitalism. She began to really read deeply. Assata joined the Black Panther. She was out in Oakland for a bit, joined the Black Panther Party. Didn't stay long. She talks about in her autobiography a while. I'll get into that in a moment. But she eventually became part of the Black Liberation Army, the BLA, which in many ways was the vanguard, you know. And because of her participation in the BLA, she became a target. She wasn't the only person who became a target. So many Black people during the time, in fact, any Black person who was involved in Black liberation was a target for the government's counterintelligence program, or COINTELPRO. So Assata Shakur, who was born Joanne Chesimard and became Assata, she became Assata around 1971, maybe 1971-ish, while part of the campus activist movements. Anyway, during that time, the government counterintelligence program honed in on her. They targeted her, and part of how the government targets you for the counterintelligence program is by railroading you, by lying on you, by framing you for things you didn't do. She was accused of bank robbery. She was accused of kidnapping. She was accused of all of these different crimes which were designed to derail her. Now, mind you, the COINTELPRO wasn't just framing people; they were infiltrating organizations. They were organizing executions. They were doing all sorts of stuff to dismantle the movement. But they had a specific focus on the BLA, and so one night in 1973, she was arrested. Now, mind you, from in the early 70s, 71, 72, 73, she was charged with lots of stuff they were looking for. And at some point, she was on the run. And we see in Angela Davis's autobiography and other autobiographies being on the run while innocent, although being targeted by the state and deemed guilty was not uncommon. But Assata was on the run. There was a manhunt for her, or a woman hunt for her. They were looking for her. And in 1973, while on the turnpike, she was pulled over. She and Sundiata Akoli and a brother named Zaid Malik Shakur, they were both in the car with her. They pulled her over. The police officers drew their weapons, and there was a firefight at some point. During this firefight, police officer James Harper was wounded, and the other one, Werner Forster, was killed. Based on all the evidence I've seen, they were not killed by the BLA members. They may have been killed through friendly fire by themselves. But of course, according to the law, if someone dies in these circumstances, the so-called criminal is going to be charged for the murder. But they said that Assata Shakur pulled the trigger and that she shot Werner Forster. Now, again, you have to read all the evidence. And in fact, Assata's aunt, before she passed away, may she rest in peace as well. I'm looking for the book, so I'm looking this way. I have it here. I just have to grab it in a moment. She demonstrated in thorough fashion why that wasn't true. But also, Assata had no use of her right arm. She couldn't have shot the gun because she couldn't lift her arm. When she was brought into police custody, she still couldn't lift her arm. It took a very long time for her to even be able to regain use of her arm, which they thought would never happen. So please believe me when I tell you she didn't do this crime. But they arrested her for it. They charged her for murder. They charged her for attempted murder. They charged her for a bunch of stuff, a bunch of crimes. And most of those crimes she was acquitted for. She was acquitted for three. Three got dismissed. But obviously, the most serious charge was the charge of murder on Officer Forster, the state trooper. And it was a kangaroo court, and she was sentenced to murder, to life in prison. While she was serving her sentence in Clinton Correctional Facility, she eventually was liberated from the prison. As time goes on, we're able to say more about that, but she was liberated in 1979 by members of the BLA. She was and others, the May 19 movement, others. Our dear brother, who is now an ancestor, Sekou Odinga, was one of the people who was convicted of participating in her escape. Sekou spent decades in prison before he was released. Maybe 10 years ago now. Time runs by, but he passed away this past year. I knew him well. He was a friend. He was a comrade. He was an elder. May he rest in peace as well. But he liberated Assata. And he was not alone. While in prison, of course, she had a baby with Zaid Shakur, her beautiful daughter, Kakuya, who now is an adult. A very grown adult, and sending her peace, love, and blessings as well. Assata was put in a men's prison. First woman to be put in a men's prison. First woman to be on the FBI most wanted terrorist list, as Joanne Chesimard. And people have been looking for her for a very long time. She ended up in Cuba in 1984. She was given political asylum. The Cuban government protected her throughout the 90s, for sure. The U.S. government intensified its search for her. Governor Ridge, I believe it was at the time, started looking for her, put out like a warrant for her arrest. They were asking bounty hunters and soldiers of fortune to come get her. I mean, they basically were putting a price on her head. They weren't really trying to bring her to justice. They were trying to kill her. And over that time, Assata became very active in Cuba, very active in politics, and very active in drawing connections with uh, with the with the with the U.S. movements. When we saw the Black August hip hop events, so there's the Black August movement. That's a separate issue, but there's Black August hip hop movement. We saw Common and Dead Prez, of course, Dream Hampton, a bunch of folk going to Cuba and really doing interesting and important organizing work over there and cultural work. Assata was right there. Uh, Very important work was done, and she was right there. Uh, Assata published her autobiography, and it was a game changer. I'll come back to that in a moment. But people became more and more familiar with her writings. You began to see poems written like Palenque Queen and other things written about her. There was a wonderful documentary on Assata that was produced. Hopefully it'll get a new life now. So much work out there is indebted to Assata. And over time, she had to lay low because of the intensifying search for her. But she always stayed in touch with her beautiful and necessary and connected comrades and community. Nahanda, of course, another wonderful comrade of hers who passed away a couple of years ago. I mean, just such beauty and power in the story. Assata meant so much to so many of us. But in the last few years, since the death of Mike Brown, we began to see Assata kind of have a second life in the same way that Baldwin had another life. His writings, his work had kind of an internet renaissance in the last decade or two. I write about it in my book, Seen and Unseen. We saw a similar thing with Assata. Everywhere you went in the Black liberation movement, or everywhere you went in the movement for Black lives, you would hear people reciting something that Assata said, not in her autobiography, but another work where she said, "It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains." And those words of Assata were recited, and it became like an affirmation. There's, again, great beauty and power. You saw people wearing, Assata taught me, and Assata images, and all these things. And we began to really understand who Assata was. One of the reasons why I encourage people to read the autobiography of Assata Shakur is because she gets into depth about so many of these things. For me, there are two. I don't know, you should, but I have like a tattoo here, the autobiography of Malcolm X. I have another tattoo here of Assata. Both of them are on me because these are the two books that radically changed my world, radically changed my life, radically changed how I understand myself and what was possible. I think Assata is one of the most underrated political biographies or autobiographies, excuse me, memoirs maybe that they are. I mean, I love hearing and seeing people tell their own story, but the story she tells is powerful. She's reflecting on what happened in the Black Panther Party. She's talking about some of the moments of, she's talking about the moments of contradiction and tension. She's talking about some of the issues that were happening in Oakland and in New York. She talked about Huey's kind of theoretical turn. We talked about the negation of the negation and losing people in her mind. She talked about her own experience as a Black girl growing up, both in the North and in the South. She talked about sexual violence and sexual assault. I remember there's a powerful piece in her autobiography where she said, they assaulted me. I understood why I hated them. What I couldn't understand is why they hated me so much. That always stuck with me. When she told her story about prison, when she told her story about the kidnapping, her being kidnapped, when she talked about what it meant to be on that turnpike, when she talked about the railroading, when she talked about the loss of life, the losses of life that she had to deal with, when she talked about the women inside that prison who she built powerful relationships with. Remember Rhinoceros Woman? When she talked about what it meant to create life in the midst of death, her beautiful, wonderful daughter, baby girl at the time, what it meant to produce her. In the midst of impossibility, she made the impossible possible. There's something so powerful and beautiful about that. And that's what Assata did in prison. And then there is this moment where she talks about how she knew she had to leave. It's a moment where her daughter Kikuyu was pushing against those bars. And she was saying, "Mommy, you could leave if you wanted to." Because she thought her mommy was in prison and didn't want to be with her. And they let her push against those bars. They let her push against the thing, and they saw her little body get defeated. They saw her little body get deflated, but they saw her little body understand. And Assata said, that's when I knew I had to leave. And I think part of the power of that book is she said she had to leave, and the next thing you know, the next chapter, freedom. That's how much this book changed. Was just tattooed all over me. She was in Cuba. There's so much power and beauty in who Assata is and what she was and what she meant and who she is to all of us. If you old school hip hop heads will listen to Rebel Without a Pause and hear Chuck D talk about I support Chesamar. That's who he's talking about. Joanne Chesamar. He's talking about Assata Shakur. Go back and listen to Like Water for Chocolate. Listen to a song for Assata. Listen to Down by Law. She got the face of a model. She got the heart of Assata. Right? I'm talking about Killer Mike's album. There's so much power in there. Assata gives us and gave us a window into the inhumanity of the prison. She gives a window into the possibilities of liberation. Another thing I love about Assata and about that book is the beauty and power of creativity. Assata's book, her autobiography, is filled with poetry. For me, again, it was a life changer. The book isn't just an autobiography. It's not just a memoir. It's also a creative endeavor. The book starts with affirmation, and affirmation is the opening piece of the book, and she says it's called Affirmation. I believe in living. I believe in the spectrum of beta days and gamma people. I believe in sunshine, in windmills and waterfalls, tricycles and rocking chairs. And I believe that seeds grow into sprouts and sprouts grow into trees. I believe in the magic of the hands and in the wisdom of the eyes. I believe in rain and tears and in the blood of infinity. I believe in life. And I have seen the death parade march through the torso of the earth, sculpting mud bodies in its path. I have seen the destruction of the daylight and seen bloodthirsty maggots prayed to and saluted. I have seen the kind become the blind and the blind become the bind in one easy lesson. I have walked on cut glass. I have eaten crow and blunder bread and breathed the stench of indifference. I have been locked by the lawless, handcuffed by the haters, gagged by the greedy. And if I know anything at all, it's that a wall is just a wall and nothing more at all. It can be broken down. I believe in living. I believe in birth. I believe in the sweat of love and in the fire of truth. And I believe that a lost ship, steered by tired, seasick sailors, can still be guided home to port. That's the opening poem to the book. And it still gives me hope. It still gives me it still does so much for me. I can't speak for anybody else, but so much for me. But there are other poems in there. After she got pregnant by Zayd and they had this baby in prison, remember, she's in life. She's locked in a prison doing life. She's never supposed to have human touch again. And she manages to conceive a child. And she wrote the poem, "Love is contraband in hell, because love is an acid that eats away bars. But you, me, and tomorrow hold hands and make vows that struggle will multiply. The hacksaw has 2 blades. The shotgun has 2 barrels. We are pregnant with freedom." We are a conspiracy. There's so many. I'm gonna read just one or two more. One of my favorites. I think my favorite is, if I can find. I know it by heart, but I want to make sure I don't mess anything up. Uh, is it everything? I don't mess it up. So everything I love is from a different world. Let me see. Yeah, I got it right. Okay. Everything you love is from a different world. Hungry, you turn your nose up at my peas and rice. It's a short one. You know, when she wrote it at the end of chapter 8, it was about the tension and contradiction between being Black and American. But I see it as a love poem too. I chose to read it as a love poem as well. Right? Everything you love is from a different world. Hungry, you turn your nose up at my peas and rice. There's another one I want to read to you. And I love it. I love it for so many reasons. Well, you know what? I won't keep reading poems. I know that ain't what everybody wants to do tonight. But I got to tell you, Assata's poetry for me is special. It does something to me. It does something for me. It's funny. Mumia Abu-Jamal called me tonight. And now I realize I couldn't answer because I was on air, but I now wonder if he was calling to talk about Assata. He must be, because they live such parallel lives in so many ways. It's hitting me now. I'm sorry, I'm processing this. I hope I get to talk to him tomorrow, because I'd love to know also just what he thinks and thought about all of this. There's so much to be thought and said about Assata, but please read that autobiography. Please read her story. Please understand who she is and who she was, and why she matters so much to us, why she has mattered to our liberation struggle. Assata lived free. She committed to freedom. And the fact that the United States could not catch her, the fact that Cuba protected her, there's so much beauty and power in that. And there's so much hope that I find in that. And I'm so grateful to our gods and our ancestors that she did not have to spend one more moment in the last 40 years. Shit, almost the last 45, 46 years, she did not spend one moment back in the dungeon, not one moment back in the cages. I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. So, Mama Assata, rest in peace, rest in power. May your soul ascend. You're soaring. And as Rennie just wrote here, shout out to her comrades, to our comrades, because this is not a one person show. This is not a story of a single great person. It's a story of community, a story of collaboration, a story of collective struggle that allowed Assata to be free, but Assata was not free for her own benefit only. Assata tied her liberation to the liberation of others. She never stopped struggling. The name Assata literally means she who struggles. And she struggled in loving service to her people until the day she died. I'm so grateful. Thank you, Mama Assata. We love you forever. Forever. It is hands off Assata. Forever. It is free all political prisoners. What's the call? Free them all. I love y'all. I'll see y'all later. Peace.